Football season is underway, so now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's free bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just sign up with promo code BLUEWIRE. FanDuel is great because it has all of your favorite bets, from the money line to point spreads to player props. The app is safe, secure, and easy to use, and you get your winnings paid fast. So sign up today with promo code BLUEWIRE for your no-sweat first bet. Make every moment more this season with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 21 plus in select states. First online real money wager only. Refund issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, or Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit KS Gambling Help in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. The Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789 in Tennessee, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming, or visit www.1800gambler.net in West Virginia.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod. We're here to talk about Michigan State's 63-58 victory over Maryland at the Breslin Center late on Tuesday night. Before we begin, I just want to make sure you're aware that we are now have through Nudge Printing, we have our swag available. So if you did not have a chance to get a t-shirt in the first round, or now there actually are hoodies available with the Final Fours on the Schedule logo, you can get those. And the probably easiest way is going through our website at thefinalfoursontheschedule.com/merchandise. There's also a little tab at the top of the website you can select. Just go to merchandise, and then you can, once you get to the part where you order stuff, you can click on it. It'll directly direct you to the site, which is our own collection on the Nudge Printing site. There you can get our stuff and then a bunch of any other Spartan gear you want at the time. All the profits from those sale of the shirts and the hoodies go to our show. So if you want to support a show, that's a great way to do it. If you get a bunch of other stuff, Nudge Printing, they've supported the show. They're great supporters, MSU alums, and so you're more than welcome to help them out. You can remember, if you order at Nudge Printing, you get 20% off your order if you enter Final Four into the coupon code at checkout. They have all kinds of cool stuff. And I was actually looking at the site today, and there's a lot of stuff I didn't even know they had. Like, they have these huge walls, like I guess they're Fatheads basic equivalent, 4 by 2 feet wide stickers, big Michigan State stuff. So if you got a man cave, want to put some in your garage or like your dorm room or something like that, they are perfect. They've got different selections, really high quality stuff. I mean, pretty cool. I mean,
I actually got sent one of those. I don't know if I told you.
No.
By Nudge. Yeah. Yeah. And it took me a minute to figure out exactly what it was. At first, I thought it was just a giant banner sized poster, but you are correct. It's multiple different fathead like Michigan State stuff that you can logos and Sparty and a couple different kinds of representations of Sparty that you can stick anywhere, much like you would with a fathead.
Yeah, and I think they kind of come off. You can replace them if you want to put them on a different wall. So if you like
Absolutely.
for a dorm room, it'd be perfect. Like you put it up and then you move the next year or something.
Sure.
They also have some really cool decals for like the cornhole or wherever you want to put it. But old stuff. I didn't even recognize a lot of these logos because they have the vintage stuff. They've got this the ones I saw with the Spartan Chariot logo. I don't know when that's from, but I think it's probably 70s is my guess. They had this sword Sparty logo, which I feel like I've seen, but it's old. They got a 1965 Spartan helmet, a tough Sparty, which it looks like that might have been like early 80s, and then a leatherhead Sparty, and of course the MAC, which is kind of one they sort of come back and forth as sort of in vogue. The Michigan Athletic College. Anyway, check out their stuff again. Nudgeprinting.com. They support the show. You guys are awesome. And we're sitting up here late at night doing the show because we think you guys are great and you deserve it. So we're going to talk about this win for Michigan State. A win they absolutely had to have. It's not one, it wasn't the end of the world if they didn't get it, but it's certainly one you had to get right at home, take out Maryland, a team that is beatable, but a good team. And so this is a good quality win.
It wouldn't have been the end of anything, but what it would have done is it would have applied more pressure to Michigan State going into these last 7 games, and they don't need that. So
we don't need it at all. So Michigan State was behind by a game in the Big Ten standings in Maryland, so now they're tied. They're both at 7-6, and they are in the clump. So I think they're like 1 or 2 games out of second place, and 1 or 2 games out of like 11th place. I think is pretty much how it works right now. The game was interesting. I would say probably something you couldn't see on TV. Maybe you could have is at the beginning of the game, the players come out, they're as they make the announcements for the starters, they're usually jumping around in a circle. They're kind of dancing around and stuff. And none of the starters were doing much dancing and like being very demonstrative. They just kind of looked sort of angry. Like all of them came out, or just very sort of maybe determined is the right word. I thought it was unusual because they don't usually look like that.
Well, let me make a comment on that. Joey Hauser said it in his post-game interview, and then in Izzo's post-game press conference, it became clear why he said what he said, because I think he parroted what the coaches have been telling them the last couple of days. The message that was delivered to Michigan State internally is that they needed to play with desperation. They needed to be desperate. And I think that was the right message. They had to find that kind of edge somehow. So I think that's probably reflected in what you observed.
Yeah. And then came out, blistering 15-0 run to start or 15-0 run to start the game. Couldn't miss. I mean, Joey hits an acrobatic like off the board. Malik Hall hits one that bounces back up and then down for a 3. They're playing good defense. Maryland, they had a couple looks, but they really couldn't do anything. Then the game sort of settled in, and Michigan State had a nice, comfortable 9-point lead going into halftime, and it sure looked like it was going to be just cruise control because even the second half started pretty well, and then, boy, wheels just came off. 14-0 run by Maryland to go up 2, and then they eventually got up about a minute later. They got up to 4, and then Michigan State went on an 8-point run and then didn't look back from there. But it was a tight game from there through the end of the finish. Notable, I think, performances. AJ Hoggard almost with a triple-double in that he had 7 points, so he didn't score a lot, but 10 rebounds, 8 assists, only 2 turnovers. And I think, we've talked about him in the past, obviously, and sort of how he plays, the team plays. He just played just tough. And there was still a little bit of the old AJ, that stretch where they're not playing well. I think that started with Holloman in the second half. I can't remember exactly, but sort of they just stagnant offense, and then Maryland got a couple things going, and he definitely was not like great leadership sort of quality. He was kind of angry, kind of yelling at people and stuff. Bad sort of body language, and then he sort of cleaned that up and was better. So he was mostly good, I would say, is my impression of him in that game. Let's talk about him first. I agree. I think it was overall total floor game, the best game he's played in weeks, plural. You mentioned the numbers, and those were, flirting with a triple-double. You did a lot of good things. I think he there were issues. You mentioned one of the problems. When things started to go badly, there was some blaming. All the stuff that we've talked about that went on last year
and I thought had been excised, but we've started to see it creep back in lately. And it's because they've been under pressure and he's been under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's falling back into some bad habits. That's not good. It's not good for him. It's not good for his team. So it's fair to point that out. It's also fair to point out that he got taken advantage of a couple of occasions during that run you're talking about that Maryland made to go from 12 down to 2 up, where he just got back cut. And that can't happen. He wasn't the only one, but it happened to him a couple times. And considering he's supposed to be one of your best defensive players, it's fair to talk about that as well as a negative. So it wasn't a perfect game, but overall, the best game he's played in weeks. And I thought he did a better job of getting MSU into their sets quickly. And this was a tougher challenge in some ways than Rutgers, because Maryland, as you, I'm sure, observed being there, they switch their defenses much more than, say, Rutgers does. There's a lot of man into zone, and you're not sure when they're going to, they're varying the rhythm of it up. Mm-hmm. So it was a tougher challenge in that respect, and yet AJ, I thought, was much better. That was a big improvement, because the Rutgers game, boy, that was the thing above everything else that really bothered me, is I did not think he did a good job at all of having recognition as to what was going on and getting his team into its sets. Much better today. Last thing, he made 2 huge winning plays down the stretch. So the first one is obvious. He stepped to the line up 2 and hit 2 free throws to make it a 4-point game. Huge.
1-1 too. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. In a 1-on-1 situation. And it was also important because that was part of, which we can talk about later, the strategic decision that Tom Izzo made down the stretch, which I think probably caught everybody by surprise. A big part of the dynamic that went into that, I have to believe, is that he looks at it and says, I've got guys who could step up and knock down free throws. So if he steps to the line and doesn't make one, well, you've lost that gamble, you know?
Yeah.
He did make them. And then the last play, up 3, Maryland pressing, and he saw Malik Hall ahead, and the pass just got there, but it got there. And it was the right decision. It was the right decision even if it had been picked off, because at the very least, he was throwing the ball into Michigan State's front court, which would have meant Maryland, even had Maryland picked it off, they would have had to go, length of the floor to try. So it would have, it was the right decision. And the fact that he made the play, and then Malik came and met the pass, which was good, and then kicked it to Jaden. And I still don't know how I feel about that dunk. It worked out. Had he missed it, the discretion is is probably the better choice there, in my opinion. Dribble it out, but it worked, so we'll take it.
Yeah.
But AJ made those 2 big plays, and that's what your floor leader, your point guard, is supposed to do, and he did it. So, were there flaws in his game at times tonight? Yes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time focusing on that, because I think the majority of what he did was very, very good. When's the last time he's had as many as 8 assists in a game? I know they cited a stat on the game. Over his previous 3, he only had 9 assists total. He almost had that many tonight.
Yeah, he was good. I mean, part of that, of course, is people hitting shots when there's some games where they're missing shots, but he was making good decisions at really good, and he was, penetrating so deep that they were way wide open when they're shooting,
All the things that we had talked about, that, one of the ways you can get better looks from 3 is when you force the defense to distort. And Michigan State doesn't have a real post presence to enable them to do that. So the only other option is via penetration. And AJ did that better tonight than we've seen in a while. Drive and kick, he was just much, much better in the areas they need him to be. So I'm encouraged because of that.
Yeah, so other performances, of course, Joey Hauser leads the team with 20 points on 3 for 5 from deep, 5 of 6 of the line, 6 of 11 from the field. Only 2 rebounds, which is kind of unusual, a couple turnovers and assist. And then Tyson Walker with 17 points, 7-15 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3, rebound, 3 assists, no turnovers, and a steal. I think he struggled a little bit down the end trying to make some things happen. And this is my only criticism sometimes all the way back to Judd, and this is probably every team, right? Like when you slow down too much and start trying to get into an offense just with 10 seconds left when there's still a minute and a half left in the game or something.
Yeah,
I understand the strategy for it, but this team needs a little bit more time than 10 seconds because it ends up being sort of hero ball, and you get into situations where you're not getting good looks.
You get out of rhythm, and I agree with that. But man, both of those guys made some big shots, and really carried the offense. I mean, those were your two guys offensively tonight.
Yep.
Hauser and Walker. So, it was good to see. And, man, I'll tell you, there are times, and you saw it for a stretch tonight, where Tyson Walker, that when they were down 4, and he went through that stretch where he hit that very tough bailout shot at the end of the clock.
Yeah.
And then, had another take at the rim, and I think hit 2 threes soon after that to help put MSU up, coming from behind for the first time in the game. That was huge. That was a huge segment because, Michigan State, you said, out to a 15-0 lead, really never got threatened. I think the closest Maryland got after that was they got within 6, and it ended up 9 at the half. And then fairly early in the second half, or maybe not even that early, it might have been several minutes into the game, into the second half, Michigan State was up 12 and seemed to be under control. And, then the roof caved in. And it would have been very easy for things to spiral. And I would guess that the vast majority of the people listening to this probably had a here we go again feeling, because it kind of felt a little bit like Rutgers. Yep. It was not exactly the same thing. Michigan State controlled the first half in a way they didn't at Madison Square Garden. But you still had, at least I had that feeling that, hey, this is a game it seemed like we were ready to put away, and instead we can't score. They're scoring repeatedly. This is going to be very tough to pull out. And then Tyson Walker showed up.
Yeah.
And kind of put the offense on his back for a stretch and put MSU back on top. And that was a very big response for the team and a very big response from him. So I was impressed with that. And of course, Joey, pretty much the whole game I thought was aggressive, which didn't surprise me, but still coming off kind of a rough shooting night against Rutgers. You don't know, and really in his last couple of games, because he wasn't that good against Purdue either. You just never know. And he came out assertive. I mean, took the first shot of the game, hit an and one jumper, and never really looked back. He stayed assertive the whole way. So a big deal from your veterans to be playing that way.
Yeah, I know we've mentioned it before too about Joey, but I was really impressed. He had a tough cover today, mostly covering Dante Scott, and for the most part, he's really solid. I mean, there are times when Dante Scott could get around him and do some stuff, but it wasn't like he was getting abused like he might have a couple years ago. And so it was really impressive how much he's progressed. And that goes along to your point, when people say, well, Kohler's doomed, he's never going to be able to do anything. You could see someone like Joey, who's, not super gifted athletically. I mean, he's not like, he can move fine, but he's not like, like a Jane Akins. But just by being solid and just understanding what people are doing, it just is impressive, how you can just become a better defender by just sort of, thinking more, I suppose, and just being prepared.
You need to get to the point that you're functional. That's a good word for it, that you're playable. And Joey this year is a prime example of it. I mean, he had 2 straight years where he really struggled to guard people. And that's not saying he's going to be on the all defense team, but nope. Joey Hauser has been pretty solid this year. He'll have moments where he gets taken advantage of, but so does everybody. I think by and large, let's put it this way. I think he's probably surpassed 99.9% of the Michigan State fan base's expectations of what he would do defensively this year. He
Yeah.
surpassed mine. I didn't
Yeah.
think he'd be this good.
Yeah, you never see him and think, uh-oh. I mean, unless you see him like at the top of the key or something, and someone's, he's got a switch onto a guard or something. But you're never like, this is a doomed possession. Like you feel like whenever I saw someone with Pierre Brooks, I'm like, oh, this is not, this may not end up well. I guess, the question too about Mady Sissoko, I thought he played a pretty good game. He didn't have statistically, he didn't have a whole lot of points at 4 points, and he had 5 rebounds. I think he had a couple more in some ways that got tipped to say Hoggard. Like, the state was crashing the boards, and he was preventing offensive rebounds from Maryland. He wasn't actually securing it, but it was ended up going other places. But, certainly setting the screens. I think he does a lot of things really well that I think we don't appreciate. But, I don't know what you think about his game.
I agree. I thought he was pretty good tonight. Casual people will focus on, there was that play where Tyson Walker missed a layup and Mady was right there, and he, instead of flushing it, he kind of fumbled the ball out of bounds in the second half, and people will focus on that stuff. I focus on what Tom Izzo talked about in the post game, which is he thought both Mady and Jackson, but Mady played a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
The job they did in pick and roll defense was really good tonight. And Mady, Mady started out like a house of fire in that area this year. He was great. I mean, I believe I said on this podcast, hey, I don't want to jinx it, but he's starting to remind me a little bit of some of the being able to do some of the things that Xavier Tillman did.
Yeah.
And then since then he's hit some patches of inconsistency, but that was not the case tonight. I thought he did really well. And, one of the ways you could tell that, I want to look at these numbers. Jameer Young is tough in pick and roll, and he had a good game. He's 17 points. He shot 5 free throws. So it was a normal game for him, but that's all it was. It wasn't an exceptional game. And he's a guy that's very difficult to deal with in that. And I thought Mady had a lot to do with the way they were able to make him work for what he got. That was really important. First basket of the game was where Hauser came around a pick and got that pass in the middle of basically the free throw line, got fouled and hit the shot. That was off a tremendous Mady Sissoko screen. I thought his screening game, other than the one time he got called for an offensive foul, which was the correct call, was really good as well. So a lot of positives for him. And I'm not just saying that because we're going to be talking to him tomorrow night. I really do believe it.
Yeah, no, he was really good. And I thought, just go through some more individual performances. I thought Jade Akins played not a great game. He had a couple good plays, but a couple rebounds, 7 points, 1 for 4 from 3. He didn't seem himself, I thought, tonight. And then Malik Hall.
Yeah, but you know what? I thought he looked pretty good defensively.
Yeah, well, that's true. He was preventing Jameer Young from getting in the lane and doing stuff.
He was part of that.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
You're right.
And so I'm going to give him credit for being able, even on a night where the offense wasn't quite clicking. I mean, he had, 1 for 4 from 3? They were all really good looks.
Yeah, they were.
Just didn't fall, but he's been shooting the ball very well. So, at Michigan State as a team was tremendous tonight. So it didn't hurt them.
Right.
But, he's entitled to have one of those. He's been playing very well for a while now. The fact that he didn't let a shaky offensive night take him out of the game defensively, I think, is notable.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And then, Malik Hall, the other, played 22 minutes, 3 of 5 from the field, 1 for 1 from 3, couple boards, couple turnovers and assist. I think he's still, I think conditioning wise, he seems okay, but I think he still seems a little bit like just not in the flow of the game. And that's what Izzo talked about after the game too, right?
Yeah, he's fighting it offensively, but what's encouraging is, okay, so he gets a 3 to fall, and it was a kind bounce.
Yeah, it's a kind rim, yeah.
You'll take it. But the other 2 plays, he had the one post up, which was the kind of stuff we were seeing him start to do with some regularity before he got hurt the second time. If you remember that stretch after he came back from the initial injury, where I thought he was really playing well.
Yeah.
And he was with some regularity. He was taking guys into the post and hitting those turnarounds, with consistency. And it was nice to see him because he forced some of those against Rutgers and they didn't fall, but he hit one tonight. That was big. And then the third shot where they just kind of left him alone.
Yeah, that was weird.
16, 17 feet.
Yeah.
And he just decided, all right, I'm going to take it, and drained it. That was encouraging too. Just the fact that he got to see the ball go through the net a few times on jumpers. None of them were layups or dunks either. They were, real shots from some range that he had to hit. And so to see that happen, I'm hopeful that that's going to take his confidence back in the positive direction. Because what I observed tonight is he just still seemed out of rhythm. Like he would have a shot window would be there, and for whatever reason, he wouldn't feel comfortable taking it. And then he'd drive himself. The couple of shots he missed were both situations like that, I thought, where he initially had a good shot opportunity, didn't take it, decided to try to drive himself into what he thought would be a better opportunity, and instead it was contested and he missed.
Yeah.
So he's just got to get back to that rhythm, but there's plenty of time. We're talking about still another month, really, basically until the Big Ten tournament starts. That's a lot of games, a lot of chances for him to find that again, and hopefully hitting a few shots tonight will help.
And finally, I don't think there's much to say about Jackson Kohler. I thought he was fine. He didn't do much offensively. And like you mentioned,
it's a shame because it's a real shame because he made a couple of great moves and just couldn't finish. Whereas he's been finishing a lot of those lately, just couldn't finish them tonight. But boy, you could see the footwork on display. It's just, I'm going to call my shot now. The uptick that you're going to see from Jackson Kohler as an offensive threat next season is going to be significant, because I have a feeling with an off season in the strength training and conditioning program and just an off season of continuing to play and kind of develop his confidence, you're going to see him finishing those kinds of plays, those moves consistently. And that is going to be, and he's going to get more opportunities too. So I'm calling my shot now. You can come at me if I'm wrong, but I see a breakthrough coming for him. Because the hardest part, not many guys can make the moves that he makes. They don't have that kind of footwork. So you're talking about a guy who's not fast and isn't that big by post player standards. And yet his footwork is so good, he gets himself wide open opportunities on the blocks against good defensive players. How does he do that? Well, it's because his footwork is that advanced, but it doesn't mean as much if you can't finish the play. And that was the problem tonight.
Yeah, right. Finally, then Pierre Brooks, who had 2 stints on the court, he had 8 minutes. I thought he looked pretty good in the first half. He didn't do anything statistically, but he seemed to be, where he's supposed to be. And then he had a lapse and just, he was part of that problem, that 14-0 run. And then he left the floor and didn't come back. Yeah.
Yeah. He had one really good segment one really good possession, I should say, in the first half. And I'm trying to remember who he got switched out on. It might've been Young. It was one of their guards. And he hung in there with them. And I believe it ended in a turnover. It was a really good, I'd have to go back to confirm that, but I remember he had one possession where it was essentially a one-on-one scenario, and he moved his feet well enough to stay in front of the offensive player, cut off any penetration, and it ended up working out for Michigan State with a change of possession. I thought that was really good. And he's had some better defensive moments lately, but you're right. In the second half, he was part of really a team-wide thing. I mean, look, the numbers tell the story. In the first half, Maryland shot 31% from the floor. In the second half, they shot 48%. Now, most of that was about the fact that Michigan State was getting back cut or just couldn't keep Maryland away from the rim.
Yeah.
And he was part of that, hardly the only offender, but yeah. And then offensively, he missed his 2 3-point attempts pretty badly. That's unfortunate, but he was okay. He did some positive things tonight.
Yeah, he wasn't a disaster, I think. And then, the one thing we didn't even talk about is that Maryland has changed their approach defensively in the last few games, where now they've pressed pretty much all the time after made baskets. They of course didn't have a chance to for a long time because they didn't make any baskets when they were down 15-0. And I think what was impressive is that Michigan State had no turnovers that I could recall in that press.
Not against the pressure.
Now,
but
you could say, well, they didn't attack it. They didn't, punish them for having the press, but you didn't make any mistakes, which is, I think, useful. And it didn't seem like they were so far behind in time that they were like rushed with their possessions usually.
That's the important thing. And I mentioned this at the outset. I thought AJ did a much better job tonight getting them into their offense. And part of that is the way they handle the pressure. Look, Maryland is not rolling out full court trapping pressure to try and generate turnovers. They're not a big turnover generating defense. What they're trying to do is they're trying to throw your rhythm off, and they're mostly trying to force you to use up time on the clock. So by the time you're actually into your half court offense, you're already down to say 15 seconds. That's their goal. And I thought MSU was okay there. I agree. They didn't really let it bother them too much.
Yeah, so maybe we should just go over the keys to the game.
What's up, everyone? I'm Sean, stacking the money green.
And I'm Ryan, real money Kramer.
And since 2011, we've hosted the Sports Gambling Podcast, where we're breaking down our favorite betting picks for the NFL, college football, NBA, golf, fantasy football.
If you can bet it, we're picking it.
And don't worry, we're not some touts trying to get you to buy our picks. Everything we put out is completely free.
We don't sell picks, we make them.
Check us out wherever you listen to your podcasts, and don't forget to let it ride.
So the 5 keys of the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. Number 1 key was threes. So Michigan State has hit threes. Well, I had hoped that they'd hit 6, and they ended up hitting 9. They're 9 of 20. And then not only were they 9 of 20, but the other half of that was Maryland is not a good 3-point shooting team. And they proved it tonight, shooting 3 of 22. Yeah, and this is one of those things where you could say, well, they got up 22 threes, so that's that's a little concerning that Michigan State gave them any looks. However, I don't think a whole lot of them are good. And I totally agree with you. I know you talked about Hakeem Hart with that weird shot where it does look like he's like pushing it from his chest, even on his free throws. But his free throws, I think he hit all of them. But anyway,
he did. Yeah, he was 1 for 6 from 3. I mean, he's been around long enough. I should have a better memory of it, but I don't remember him shooting that way in the past. He may have. I may just be misremembering it. But it's been striking to me this year. Certainly, he plays a bigger part on this team than he has in previous years. That's also part of it. I'm probably focused more on him, but it's not pretty. Look, we keep saying it every game, and tonight is another example. Michigan State wins this game by 5 points, and they were, what was it, plus 18 and made threes.
Yeah.
Versus Maryland. So is it important? Yeah, pretty much so. That's, but here's the thing. Michigan State is a good jump shooting team. They are. And most of the time, they're not going to go 9 for 20 every time out, but most of the time they're going to shoot reasonably well. The games that they don't, it's hard for them. It's hard for them because they don't have the other options. And we've talked about this some. They don't have the other offensive options that Michigan State teams of the past have had. They don't have a great post player to dump the ball into. They don't get out in transition. I thought they got off to a good start in this game in that way, and then it just stopped. Some of it is down to what you had said. Maryland was making some shots. They were able to set up their pressure, which prevented MSU from running as much as they would like. But regardless, my point is Michigan State doesn't get scoring in ways that we're used to seeing them score. So it really leaves 3-point shooting as being more important than even it normally is for MSU. And thank God they shoot it well, because if this team didn't, whew,
Yeah,
we'd be looking at some all-timer kind of offensive utility stuff, I think. But they do shoot it well. And they shot it well tonight, and it was, once again, it was a difference maker.
you can't. Rarely can you do everything well. Like, rarely do you have a guy who's great in the post, rarely, and have great shooting and have people who can penetrate. I mean, usually there's some trade-offs that you have with your team. And so, elite teams can do all those things maybe.
There are, but I would submit that we are used to seeing Michigan State teams, not every single season, but often, be in Big Ten title contention, be in, high seed contention, be talked about as a potential Final Four team. And those teams, more often than not, have had all of those elements. If you think about the Denzel Valentine senior year team, unbelievable 3-point shooting team, but that team could also score in transition. And they also had a little bit of a post presence. Matt Costello certainly wasn't going to make you forget Zach Randolph, but Matt Costello developed into a pretty reliable post-up guy by the end of his career. And the point is, if threes weren't falling, he was a legitimate option to counter that in a way that this current team doesn't have. The 17-18 team had an embarrassment of riches. I mean, they could do everything. It didn't work out in the end in terms of a tournament run, but it sure did in the regular season. That's just two. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
Yeah, sure.
They usually do. When Michigan State is really good, it's not just one way. They score.
Right.
They've got counters. The Cassius teams, they didn't have great post play, but they could shoot threes extremely well, and they were a good transition team. Plus, with Cassius and X, they were an elite pick and roll team, which this current bunch is not. Witness a couple of attempts with Mahdi that were not his fault, that were just bad plays by AJ. But so it's just, it's why we keep drilling this 3-point thing week in, week out, game in, game out, because it's true. This MSU team does not seem to have a lot of other counters if the threes aren't going. So it's a good thing they were tonight. Here's the thing. What you can be impressed by is not just the percentage that they shot, but that they got 20 attempts. Maryland does a really good job of holding down 3-point attempts. MSU got 20 up. That's a result of the things we were talking about. Penetration and good ball movement.
Yeah. And I would say almost all those 20 were good attempts. I think,
Pierre
had one that was his last one. That was an air ball, was a bad attempt because it was like hand grenade shot, but
right.
They were pretty good looks.
Absolutely.
So number two key to the game, AJ, we kind of talked about this. He played a good game, and hopefully he maintains it, and gets maybe even a little bit better.
Look, it's really simple. When Michigan State gets AJ Hoggard playing like this, or like he was for most of the first 2 months of the season or so, they can hang with anybody in the country, and I mean that. They can hang with anybody. But when they don't get that, it's a struggle to win.
Right.
He's that important.
And it affects the threes too, right? I mean, like if he's not I mean, it
affects everything.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So number 3 key to the game, defend without fouling. Well, so Michigan State had less free throws than Maryland made. So that Maryland was 15 of 18 from the line, which is really good. Michigan State was 10 of 18 or 10 of 13. So not great. And especially there were a lot of and ones too. Couldn't worse, I suppose.
It was a weird game. Maryland, I think Michigan State was in the bonus in the first half with like 12 minutes to play.
And reverse in the second half, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was standard issue officiating. Yeah. Dante Scott, 2 fouls in the first 2 minutes of the game, didn't pick up another one. And it wasn't because he wasn't playing physically, I'll tell you that. Look, in comparison to some of the games we've seen recently, I didn't have massive problems with the way this one was officiated. And I actually think if you look at it, What did Maryland end up with? Sorry, 18
It's
free throw attempts.
yeah.
It's not great, but it's also not a disaster. You certainly wouldn't expect a disaster when you're playing at home, but who the hell knows? Um, I thought when I look at their guys, Jameer Young gets 5 free throw attempts. Okay, that's a number I can live with, because where you get worried about that guy is if he's getting 8, 9, 10 attempts, which is telling you you're not able to stay in front of him. He's blowing by guys and getting to the rim and forcing fouls. We didn't see very much of that. So I'm not going to say it was a big positive, but it wasn't the real downside kind of performance you worry about.
The next key to the game was rebounding. This was strength versus strength and weakness versus weakness, and it was Michigan State had 31 rebounds. Or sorry, they had 30 rebounds. Maryland had 31. Maryland only with 16% offensive rebounding percentage, which was great. Michigan State was 7, and the only one with the offensive rebounds for Michigan State was the sideline. So overall, there's no big advantage for Maryland on rebounding.
This has to rate as a season low, I would think, in terms of offensive rebounding for Michigan State.
7%.
Yeah. On the other hand, they didn't give up very much at the other end. So we kind of wondered if weakness against weakness, MSU offensive rebounding, Maryland defensive rebounding, how that would play out. And it turns out that Maryland's weak spot won, but the relative strength, Maryland's on a great offensive rebounding team, but they're better than they are on the other end versus a pretty good defensive rebounding team, Michigan State. So the strength against strength side, Michigan State's strength won out. Only 5 offensive rebounds for Maryland. They did a very good job. So with AJ Hoggard leading the way with a double-digit effort. So yeah, I would say it ended up as a push.
Yeah, I mean, second chance points, 4-2 advantage Maryland. So not really much difference.
Non-factor.
Yeah. Finally, the transition game. Michigan State, as you mentioned earlier, they started well. They finished with, they were credited with 11 fast break points to Maryland's 5. So, they got some stuff going, but not a lot.
Yeah, not very much in the way of transition, as we said. Early on, there were some signs. Those first few possessions, I thought Michigan State actually pushed the ball really well. And then after that, it was sporadic and intermittent. But give Maryland some credit for that. That pressure that they were able to apply had something to do with slowing it down.
Well, I think, the only other thing is I was in the free throw challenge. For those dozens of you who are interested, it was much like Michigan State. I thought it was kind of an ugly win. I won, so I made it to the finals. I'll be shooting at the Ohio State game, so I won 5-2. And it's amazing. As much as I practiced, I feel like I didn't shoot any better. My form was no better than it was, it was the first time I shot. So not really much of a difference there. I guess, next Michigan State goes to Ohio State. Any thoughts about, this win and what it means for the team going forward?
I think obviously, as we talked about near the outset, was it a must win by the strict definition of that? No. I mean, when you talk about must wins, what I mean by those are situations like 2 years ago, where MSU had all those games against top 5 or top 10 opponents down the stretch, and they desperately needed wins to put together an NCAA tournament resume. And they got them. Those were must wins. Tonight was not a must win, but it was a win that you really, really wanted to have, because it dials down the pressure some in these remaining games. Look, MSU has 7 games left. 4 of them are on the road, 3 of them are at home. I don't think that Michigan State is in much trouble if they just basically hold serve. If they were to only win the 3 remaining home games, I think that would probably be enough to get them into the tournament. I really do. Because one of those would be against an Indiana team that is actually checking out pretty nicely right now in the metrics. So
Right.
they also have a road game at Nebraska, which you would like to think you can win. So that would be a fourth. Then you've got these road games. You got at Columbus next this coming weekend, at Ohio State. You got at Michigan. You got at Iowa. I'm not going to suggest that any of those or all of them will be easy. They won't be. No road game is easy. We see that, truthfully, no home game is easy at this point. But I still think that what I said after the Purdue game, that I felt like Michigan State was in position to go on something of a run, meaning like a 6-3 type finish. I still think that's out there as a possibility. I really do. They've got work to do, but gutting out a win and the dynamics that were in play in this game, where you got off to such a great start and then you give all that back. Maryland has all the momentum. They're riding a 4-game winning streak too, so you know they're feeling confident. And what does Michigan State do? They can fold their tent or they can respond. Well, they responded and they pulled it out. And so I think that has to be taken as a positive. Now, you're only as good as your next game. So they go into Columbus and there's an opportunity there. Ohio State is absolutely reeling. I think at this point, it would take a minor miracle for Ohio State to be a tournament team. It's gotten that bad. But at home, and certainly while they have struggled to win, they, for the most part, have not been getting run off the floor. And they have some individual players who are very difficult matchups. I mean, Bryce Sensabaugh, their freshman wing, first among several. So it's going to be a challenge, but it's something that Michigan State is clearly capable of doing. So I think it's important on a lot of levels. First and foremost, you break a streak. You'd lost 2 in a row, 5 of 7. So
Yep.
to get any win is a big deal. To get one under the circumstances, the dynamic, the narrative this game was played under was also important. And we'll see if they can build on it. But I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. If you can give me some version of this AJ Hoggard, I'm always going to be optimistic.
Yeah.
It's that important.
Well, we will come back for the Ohio State pregame, which is on Super Bowl Sunday. Before then, we will be interviewing Mady Sissoko. So make sure you, if you're not subscribed, be sure you subscribe in your podcast player of your choice. You can also check us out on YouTube. That will premiere on Thursday afternoon at noon is the plan. And so until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.
What's up, everyone? I'm Sean, stacking the money green.
And I'm Ryan, Real Money Kramer.
And since 2011, we've hosted the Sports Gambling Podcast, where we're breaking down our favorite betting picks for the NFL, college football, NBA, golf, fantasy football.
If you can bet it, we're picking it.
And don't worry, we're not some touts trying to get you to buy our picks. Everything we put out is completely free.
We don't sell picks, we make them.
Check us out wherever you listen to your podcasts, and don't forget to let it ride.